Today's video is a character deep dive, something I haven't done in quite a while, in all honesty. And we're going to be looking into one of the most popular characters in Life is Strange, a series that is near and dear to my heart. If this is your first time watching my videos, I do a ton of Life is Strange content, whether it's cut content, character breakdowns, theories, reviews, that kind of thing. But today's video is about a character that is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, and that is Khloe Price. What we're going to be doing is looking at her life in chronological order, and we're going to look at every little detail, break things down, and yeah, really, it's just a character exploration. So without further ado, let's discuss Khloe Price. Khloe Elizabeth Price was born on March 11th, 1994. This would make her zodiac sign a Pisces. She was born to William and Joyce Price. As far as immediate family goes, she doesn't have any siblings, but an Uncle Aaron is mentioned to exist, and he is apparently helping the family out with financial stuff after William passes away. Khloe is seemingly left-handed, according to the game's creator Michael Koch. The other interesting thing about characters being left-handed or right-handed in this series in particular is that Max Caulfield appears to be ambidextrous, and there are also scenes where Khloe uses her opposite hand. And that it really just comes down to an issue with the production as well as the motion capture. While there isn't a specific date or story behind Khloe meeting Max Caulfield, they did meet very, very early on in their childhoods, because they only lived about half a mile away from each other. While Max's original address isn't known, it's said that Khloe lives on 44 Cedar Avenue. It appears that the pair, Max and Khloe, spent most of their time hanging out at Khloe's house. When the two would hang out, one of their most common games that they would play is pirates. They would pretend to be pirates. There's several drawings that can be found, as well as images of them in costumes, as well as the entire plot of Farewell, which we will touch on, being about them going through an old map trying to find a lockbox full of memories, similar to a buried treasure. One of the other fun things is that the pair would pretend that the couch in the living room was a pirate ship, among other things. They would also do various other scenarios and play pretend, basic kid stuff. There is also a tree house in the backyard of Khloe's house, as well as a swing that the two of them would play on, but the tree house is actually marked on an orientation map of Arcadia Bay that Khloe made. Khloe is a character that I would call selfish. She's written in a fairly selfish way when it comes to how she wants things, her motivations behind wanting those things, as well as the way that she treats her friends and other people. This is shown early on with Khloe wanting her dad to keep track of both hers and Max's height. While this does appear to be a basic sort of like innocent thing, I think it does come down to her wanting to be competitive and wanting to win at something, because she has consistently been taller than Max. It's just a little detail that I think plays into her overall character. In 1999, Khloe's parents would bring back a cat named Bongo, and he would sort of just become the family pet. He can be seen in several of Max and Khloe's superhero adventure drawings. However, Bongo would sadly be killed by a car, and the pair and Khloe and Max would bury him in the backyard, and his grave can still be seen. This is the first example of Khloe dealing with the loss of a close, basically family member. If you've had pets, they do become like family members, and so this is really what I would consider the first real loss for Khloe. And it's the first of many, and these losses are what really inform her character the most, in my opinion. This is just an odd detail I found when doing research for this, is that basically Khloe had a habit of using Max's toothbrush. Apparently it became an issue where Max actively disliked that Khloe was using her toothbrush, but Khloe didn't care if Max used her. And I like to imagine that it's one of those things where she would do it, she kind of got in trouble for it or upset about it. She was like, no, you can use mine, you can use mine. But it's like, no, Khloe, I don't want to use your toothbrush. One of the most well-known Khloe and Max childhood stories would be their wine tasting session that took place in 2008. The two basically thought it would be a good idea to try Joyce and William's wine, and they ended up spilling it on the carpet, and they were unable to get the stains out before they were caught, and the stain can still be seen all the way in the events of Life is Strange 1. It's just a funny story, and even if you don't know much about this pair, even if you didn't play Farewell or Before the Storm, it just sets up perfectly their dynamic of Khloe being the sort of instigator, the thrill seeker who's always, even before she goes down this darker path, that even then she was still this thrill seeker, troublemaker type, even though that was much more tame, and that Max was always sort of the introverted, trying to keep everything in order type of person. I think it's very interesting that this simple story sets the stage for their dynamic throughout the game. 2008 would end up being a very, very packed year in terms of things that occur and that are important to Khloe Price's life and upbringing. One of the most tragic being her father's passing. William Price would end up passing away due to a horrible car accident. He was going to the store to pick up Joyce, and on the way was struck by another vehicle, and it completely totaled his car. This is a very important point of the story, as in the first game as Max, you have the opportunity to go back in time and alter that timeline to prevent William from dying, and we're briefly going to examine that. In this alternate timeline where William survives, Khloe ends up being a straight-A student. She doesn't go down this other path that she does in the main timeline. However, the universe sort of balances itself out in the end, and Khloe, while driving, gets into a car accident and is paralyzed from the neck down. However, Khloe, showing her resilience, would actually end up becoming fairly acclimated to this way of living. She's shown to have a very complicated PC setup where she's shown to be able to operate it very efficiently and even play video games. However, it's alluded that Joyce and William are having financial troubles due to the sheer amount of medical equipment that is required to keep their daughter alive and also happy. So, due to that, as well as other factors, like Khloe's depression, she asks Max to end her life. But the interesting thing is that she is still, once again, has that sort of rebellious spark. We hear a few comments from her as they're watching Blade Runner, as well as their conversation on the beach, that show that at Khloe's core, she is that sort of high energy person who's willing to challenge anything and initiate anything, and she's not afraid of conflict, and even though she's been through this horrible accident. And I think it's a sort of testament to the character as well as the writing to show that this little choice doesn't change her at her core. But anyway, back to the main timeline. In the Farewell DLC for Life is Strange Before the Storm, not only do we see the return of Hannah Tell as well as Ashley Birch as their characters, we also pick up where Max would have left off in that sort of area where William leaves and she changes the timeline. It picks up right after that. The pair find a sort of treasure map that leads to this box of memories from when they were little kids. Despite the fact that they are children in this flashback, they still sort of are like, it was so long ago. It's like ancient history. We've grown up so much since then. It's really fun and relatable because I think everybody sort of feels that way at every age, where they look back and they go, wow, I'm so different, I'm so mature now, and then a few years later they go, God, I didn't know what I was talking about. And it's really fun to see that sort of banter, and once again setting the stage for their future relationship. Throughout the day, Max struggles to tell Khloe that she has to move to Seattle very, very soon. And you even get a choice to either tell her or not. When it comes to what is the canon choice, I really wasn't able to find a solid answer or any references in later games that confirm that one or the other is true. But I would like to believe that Max was able to tell her. However, shortly afterwards, Joyce comes home and informs them that William has passed away in a car accident. Afterwards, we see a short burial scene, and then as Max is leaving, we see that in the car is all of their belongings. It's basically implied that following this funeral, Max moves away to Seattle right then and there. Depending on the choice that you made regarding telling Khloe about moving to Seattle, Max will leave a cassette tape that has two different responses. The one where Max did inform Khloe of her leaving is more of just a, hey, I understand that me leaving right now is the worst possible thing, but I hope that hearing my voice will somewhat soften the blow. She reassures her that we will talk, we will keep in touch, and it's more of just a one last goodbye kind of thing. Alternatively, if you don't tell her that you're moving, the cassette is the first time that Khloe is informed of this. It's gut-wrenching seeing her reaction afterwards, where Max shows off her worst qualities, which is her fear of conflict, saying that she just couldn't find the right time to tell Khloe about the fact that she was moving and making up these sorts of excuses. This is a habit that we see from Max, especially in Life is Strange 1, when she's coming up with excuses as to why she didn't reach out to Khloe when she returned. So I kind of take back what I said, is that both of them feel viable. Both of them feel within reality for Max Caulfield, especially her being younger and not having learned the lessons that she has later on. So to put it in perspective, Khloe loses her father and her best friend within the span of a few months. And if you didn't tell her you were moving, she just goes from a funeral and then immediately finds out this information. And what this does so well is, I still believe that Khloe is a selfish character. And she's a flawed character. She's a toxic character. However, it's not unmotivated. It makes perfect sense for her, the trauma she's been through losing her father, as well as losing her best friend. It totally makes sense that she would go down the path that she ends up going down. I think it makes perfect sense, and that's why she's a great character. I might not think she's a good person, but granted, she's a fictional character. It's all well written, it's motivated, it makes sense, and I think laying out her life in this sort of chronological timeline shows that for the people who sort of viewed her as erratic and she didn't make sense and she was just selfish, that no, this is all very motivated. I think many of us may go down a similar path if at this very, very fundamental, very malleable point in our lives, these two awful things happen to us. Khloe later admits that she did go to counseling, and I am guessing that it happened fairly shortly after this event. I can imagine Joyce instantly seeing what's going on with her daughter, wanting to get ahead of it and trying to send her to counseling. However, according to her, she stopped going because she didn't like what the counselor said. And this is where we get into sort of the toxic side of her, that selfish side of her. She wants to be right. She's competitive. So when a counselor tells her that, hey, maybe learning at least a little bit how to let go, how to move on, try to move forward from your father's passing, as well as your friend leaving, Khloe didn't want to hear that, so she didn't accept it. And that's the beginnings of how we get to the point that where she is in Life is Strange 1, where she is fully unable to let go of anything. Something like her father passing, or Max leaving, or something more recent like Rachel. She's unable to let go of anything until the end of the story. But this perfectly sets that up. That little line of dialogue of "I just didn't like what they had to say" perfectly sets up exactly why and who she is. Later in that year, Joyce would actually end up meeting David. Basically the same year that her husband passed away, and you can totally understand why Khloe hated him from the jump. At this point, she's very young and very lost and sad, and she doesn't really know where to put all that energy, and it turns into hate for David and others. Khloe most likely enrolled in Blackwell Academy around 2009 when she was 15. We can also assume this is when she began to do drugs as well as other substances. We've seen that she has an affinity for alcohol, with wanting to do the wine testing at such a young age, but this is probably when she meets Frank and Justin, who's a skater, and we'll kind of briefly touch on him later, and begins to get into doing drugs such as like marijuana and other things. In the original game, it's stated that she was out of the school around 2010. However, due to the events of Before the Storm, this was pushed to like the end of 2010. Like they were really pushing it because by the time we start that game, she still goes to school. She still attends Blackwell Academy. Her student file reveals that she had a 1.7 GPA and was overall not a great student. In Before the Storm, we see that she has much better grades, specifically in mathematics courses and chemistry, because she's shown to be very, very smart and very talented in those areas. However, it appears that in all the teacher comments and in dialogue with the teachers that they all say the same thing. And that would be that Khloe is brilliant, but she's not a hard worker. And it's easy to see why. These gifted kids tend to get sort of burnt out because they're put in these extra hard classes. They don't want to work as hard. They never fully learn how to study. And it seems a mixture of Khloe's delinquence as well as being a gifted kid led to this sort of outcome. When it comes to why she was thrown out of Blackwell Academy, initially it's stated that it's due to participating in pranks and vandalism. And while we do see both of these things happen within the story of Before the Storm, whether it is her Sharpie vandalism or any of the smaller interactions and I guess ways you can mess with other students, such as giving Victoria Chase all the wrong answers, I would consider that a prank. You could technically say that, yeah, that's why she got kicked out. However, we see in Before the Storm that it appears that her final straw was her skipping school with Rachel, and that would end up being the sort of last thing, the last sort of, hey, you've got one more chance to not screw this up. So I think they should have included her constantly skipping class as a reason, but then again, it's like more of a retcon, I guess. Speaking of Rachel Amber, Rachel is a very, very important character within Khloe's story. Rachel is Khloe's first love, if you go down that route, and I believe that all the dialogue in Life is Strange 1, as well as the character that Rachel takes inspiration from, which would be Laura Palmer from Twin Peaks, it makes a lot of sense. Khloe in the first game says so many things that can be taken romantically about Rachel, and it makes total sense, especially the betrayal she feels when she finds out that Rachel was involved with Frank. The other thing is Laura Palmer in Twin Peaks, which is a show that the creators of Life is Strange took a lot of inspiration from and specifically based Rachel Amber on, was involved in many different romances with many different people, and they all have nice things to say about her, and she's wild and all this and that. It's very similar, so I think going forward, I'm going to treat it as if they were in a romantic relationship, because I believe that with all of the information we've gotten from Life is Strange 1, as well as the options in Before the Storm, it makes the most sense. The pair meet in the year 2010 at a Firewalk concert where Rachel basically saves Khloe from getting jumped by these two skeevy sort of a-holes at the concert. From there, that sparks a very passionate, very toxic romance between the two, as Rachel is a type who sort of complements Khloe's outgoing and confrontational nature with her very own set of goals and things like that. This is also where we sort of see the origin point for why Khloe says the phrase hella. It's because Rachel introduced her to that and just said, yeah, it's a thing we say out in California or whatever. And yeah, that's basically where it started. I kind of liked seeing that as much as it felt like an MCU like origin thing, like, huh, hella. I like that phrase. Through the events of Before the Storm, Rachel is searching for answers in regards to her family, what her father is doing. Is her father cheating? She eventually finds out that he isn't cheating, but he is in fact talking to her birth mother, and there's all sorts of crazy drama that happens. But in the end, Khloe can either tell the truth about Rachel's father being involved in the death of her biological mother, or she can lie to her about it. And I believe that the most likely canon ending would be Khloe telling the truth, because this would further cement Rachel's motivation for wanting to move away from Arcadia Bay and go to Seattle. We see them talk about this sort of plan of wanting to get away, but they're talking in less specifics, and they do plan on doing it the night of the show. They want to pack up and leave right then and there, but it's a lot more loose. It's a lot less planned out. But I feel like if she knew this horrible, horrible truth about her father and what he did to her biological mother, no matter how necessary he felt it was, I think that would just further motivate her and further alienate her from her family and push her to actually logistically plan out. We need to save money. We need to figure out the car situation. We need to figure out where we're going. As we see in Life is Strange 1, they had a plan and they were just there. They were just ready to go, according to Khloe, before she would disappear. So I think Khloe telling her the truth and Rachel learning this information would motivate her and would add to this sort of need to escape. I also just don't see Khloe, who is insanely devoted to Rachel, despite the fact that Rachel might not be, fully devoted to her. She might just like the attention from Khloe more than the actual relationship, but that's for the Rachel Amber video later on. But like I said, Khloe's devoted to Rachel, so I don't see a world where Khloe would keep that from her. Between the years of 2008 and 2010/13, Khloe's hair would change dramatically. It would start out much longer past her shoulders, then she would cut it short, and then by the end of Before the Storm, she decides to dye it with a blue streak, and then from there it evolves into the full blue hair that we see in the original game. Also during this time, we can assume that's when she made most of her friends. People such as Justin, who is a skater that she's shown to be friendly with and possibly sells drugs to or is involved with him in some drug-related aspect. Also during this time and the events of Before the Storm, Khloe has a friend named Elliot Hampton. The best way to describe Elliot is that he is what people thought Warren was. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people, and you can go check out my Warren Graham video that I did where I deep dive into him and sort of analyze him, and I came to the conclusion that while Warren is a little odd, we have to remember that he's just a teenage boy who has a crush on a girl, and he doesn't know how to act around girls because he's like 16. He's younger than all of the other characters. That's not an excuse for some of the weirder things he does, but I think it's important to consider that when he says certain things. But back to Elliot. Elliot is what people think Warren is, and by that I mean Elliot is a stalker. He is obsessed with Khloe in an unhealthy way, and Khloe, who I believe is confirmed to be a lesbian, has no interest in him and only saw him as a friend, and he takes this personally. He becomes violent, he becomes angry with her, obsessive, stalking. He's everything, every horrible stereotype about Warren that you hear. That is what Elliot is. He says a lot of those nice guy things that like girls don't pay attention to him. He deserves attention from Khloe, all those sorts of things. I will say though, one of the interesting things is that apparently Khloe and Elliot did hook up multiple times post William's death. She simply attributes it to the fact that she was lonely and depressed and kind of just wanted attention, and she purely viewed it as this is a strictly sexual encounter. That's that. Nobody needs to get their feelings wrapped up in this, but clearly he took it much more personally, and that led to his obsession, and that doesn't justify him in any way. I want to clarify that right now. He is still a creepy, unhinged, violent stalker. Just because they had an encounter together, they had, in the words of Khloe, they have history but no chemistry or drama. Well, actually, eventually they would have drama because of the crazy stuff he would end up doing. However, obviously, that, once again, doesn't justify his actions. He's still an insane stalker. While, once again, I think Khloe is confirmed to be sort of a lesbian, any encounters she has had with men, it appears that she writes it off as simply an attention-oriented thing. And I think that could be interpreted as an example of heterocomp, and it shouldn't be really taken as anything more serious, especially since she doesn't really attribute any meaning to it beyond that. Another important friend who would eventually evolve into a very important character in a different Life is Strange game is Steph Gingrich. Steph is described as the coolest/nerdiest person at Blackwell, according to Khloe, and you can play D&D with her out in the sort of courtyard area. The two would end up staying in touch if Khloe survives the events of Life is Strange 1, because she is mentioned in the Wavelengths DLC that follows Steph. Along with Steph, there is Mikey, who is sort of your stereotypical nerd. He is also there when they play D&D, And it appears that they stay in touch and that the two do sort of get along after the events of Before the Storm. Warren is a character that Khloe appears to have a friendship with. In the events of Life is Strange 1, she has his number and will sort of mess with him if her and Max kiss or things like that. And so it appears that they've built up over the years some sort of friendly rapport. At the very least, they're acquaintances who, you know, when they're stuck in a room together or a class together, they know, hey, that person's cool, I can go talk to them and I don't have to deal with other people. But beyond that, I think that's sort of the extent of their relationship. The other interesting thing is that it appears that they knew each other all the way back in Before the Storm, especially when you can find emails or texts from Elliot and Warren, both of them arguing about some sort of nerdy interest, and I believe Khloe makes some sort of comment about it. Frank Bowers is a very complicated character in Khloe's life. In Before the Storm, he is seen as sort of a reliable friend, a good guy in her eyes that she can rely on, and he's also her drug dealer. However, things take a turn in Life is Strange 1, as at this point Khloe owes him a ton of money, and her plan to leave Arcadia Bay involves just leaving without paying him back, frankly. And so obviously at this point in time, he's sort of tired of her BS. He just wants her to pay her debt, and that's that. The other odd thing is that Life is Strange 1 has confirmed that Rachel and Frank had a very intimate relationship, and Khloe is very, very upset by this. I think it's for multiple reasons, because for one, her and Rachel have a very, very close relationship, and Khloe felt that, you know, they were going to run away together. They were going to do all these things. And it's another example of, while Rachel hasn't left yet, this is an example of someone betraying her once again, even from beyond the grave at this point. And someone that she knows and would consider a good guy also betraying her. Another very interesting relationship that Khloe would develop over the course of her time at Blackwell and afterwards is her relationship with Nathan Prescott. It's very interesting because when we see Nathan in Before the Storm, Khloe feels more sorry for him than anything. He's constantly being bullied, he clearly has mental health issues, and she sort of just pities him. It appears that she was also aware, whether it was through Frank or through selling it herself, of Nathan's drug usage and the fact that him and Victoria were sort of pumping all of these drugs into the Vortex Club parties. He would also, at some point closer to the events of Life is Strange 1 rather than Before the Storm, attempt to assault her. Basically what happened is the two were having drinks, she was trying to steal money from him, and he would end up slipping something in the drink. She then says that he was crawling towards her with a camera. When she woke up, she was able to kick him and escape. Some people debate on whether or not this was Nathan attempting to take her to the dark room, or if this was just Nathan being a weirdo and trying to assault Khloe for whatever reason, probably out of some sick want for revenge in some capacity against Rachel, who had largely abandoned the Vortex Club and a lot of those elite kids at the school at that point. They kind of disliked her at that point for it. But for whatever reason, it is insane. And that delivery of that story from Khloe always gives me like chills whenever, like, it's disgusting. It makes you hate Nathan even more. Between the years of 2010 and 2013, Khloe and Rachel would continue to plan their escape. They would set aside money. They would really sort of set the stage for this big escape, this big getaway from Arcadia Bay. However, on April 22nd, 2013, Rachel Amber would disappear. So despite all the planning, despite everything they had built, she vanished, just like that. And yet again, it's another person who's leaving Khloe. Once again, like William, it's not an intentional thing. She didn't mean to sort of abandon her in this way. Same with William. He didn't mean to get himself killed. However, Khloe still blames both of them, despite it not being their faults. From that point on until about October, when Life is Strange 1 takes place, Khloe would put up missing persons posters for Rachel everywhere. I mean, I swear, I don't think there's a single stage in Life is Strange where there isn't a missing persons poster for Rachel Amber. And it just shows you once again the dedication and the devotion that Khloe had for Rachel. On October the 7th, 2013, a Monday, Khloe would enter the Blackwell Academy women's restroom and attempt to blackmail Nathan Prescott. She would use his sort of drug use, his mental illness, as well as what he attempted to do to her as this blackmail. But what she wasn't expecting was Nathan Prescott pulling a gun on her and fatally shooting her. Now, obviously, there's two very different outcomes of this situation, as Max Caulfield was just around the corner, and Max was able to save her. This sends you down the whole path of Life is Strange 1, and the drama, and the intrigue, and that kind of thing. When it comes to Max and Khloe's relationship, it once again exemplifies her sort of selfishness, and her sort of self-centered outlook that she has on the world. She blames everybody for leaving her, and even when it's not their fault, and it's just sometimes the way that life goes. Max didn't necessarily choose to move to Seattle, it just happened. Now granted, I would understand her being really upset if Max didn't tell her she was moving to Seattle, as yeah, that would be pretty screwed up for her to do. But throughout the story, it revolves around them wanting to find out what happened to Rachel Amber. And it's clear that Khloe is still in love with Rachel. However, despite that, she can still sort of pursue something romantic with Max. However, I feel that is similar to the Elliot thing where it's purely for that attention. It's because she misses Rachel. I mean, their kiss happens around the same time that she has Max wear Rachel's clothing. It just rubs me the wrong way to have these two be romantic. However, I do fully understand that for a lot of people, it was a very influential thing. It was a very important thing, seeing, you know, these two women together, and sort of an awakening for a lot of people, and very important for the queer community as a whole, to have that in a video game front and center. I just think dramatically, Khloe is still in love with Rachel, and I think it just kind of weirds me out a little bit. However, you know, it's still an option they can go down. In the end, the player must choose to either sacrifice the town or sacrifice Khloe. And depending on your outcome, it's very different. Obviously, you sacrifice Khloe, she dies in that bathroom right then and there, and that's the end of her story. So going forward, we're going to look at the timeline where Khloe is alive. There's two very, very different paths for this. One path is the comic series, which follows this ending. And it's its own very interesting story that spans across multiple different timelines and variations. It's all very, very interesting. If you'd like me to do a full deep dive of the comics, please leave a comment below telling me to. I would absolutely love to, because I have all of them right over there. I'm pointing to them right now. You can't see it, but I have all of the comics, so I would absolutely love to do a deep dive on those and the sort of different timelines that exist out there. However, with the release of later games, such as True Colors as well as Double Exposure, we get a little more information as to what happened to Max and Khloe post the storm. In Life is Strange 2, David Madsen has a picture of Max and Khloe together in Arizona. At this point in time, Khloe has sort of let her hair fade a bit. It's much longer, and the blue has turned to sort of a greenish color. This photo would become sort of a piece of contention among people who watch my videos, which we will touch on that, I promise. But the pair are seen together, and he actually goes inside to take a phone call from Khloe. Sean actually comments that they both look really cool, or something along those lines when he sees the photo, which I would agree. The interesting thing about this photo is that there are two different versions. One version in Double Exposure and one version in Life is Strange 2. And while the composition, the details in the background are largely the same, the biggest difference is that in Double Exposure the pair are smiling, and in Life is Strange 2 the pair are not smiling. At some point in time before late 2023, which is when Double Exposure takes place, Khloe would end up leaving Max. Now, whether they are friends and she simply said, "I can't handle you anymore," or if they went down a romantic path, that is for you to decide. However, she did leave her, which is just such a full circle moment for Khloe, and also proves to me how narratively her being alive is just not as satisfying because she doesn't learn her lesson. In the end of the game, when you sacrifice her, when she's begging to be sacrificed, she sort of comes full circle that this town has so much more to it than she thought, and that these people, despite the anger, despite her rage, they don't deserve to die. However, in this timeline where she's alive, it appears that she hasn't really learned her lesson about valuing people, because she leaves Max, the girl who stuck with her through everything and promised never to leave her. She left her. And to me, it just, it puts such a depressing but realistic bow on this very toxic, trauma-bonded friendship/relationship between these two characters. And that brings me to the little controversy with the photos. I quoted the creator of the game, who mentioned that they were not smiling in the photo, and that was intentional because of the sort of stress and trauma that came from everything that happened in the first game. And what I said is that to me sort of leads into them breaking up. It makes sense to me, because that sort of trauma hangs over people. No matter how close you are, no matter how many times you swear up and down, oh, I'm never gonna leave you, that stuff sticks with you. And while people may not like that Khloe left Max, whether as a friend or romantically, it falls perfectly in line with her character, in my opinion. That's just me. That's my own little personal interjection. Khloe's whereabouts post-breakup are unknown. The only thing we do know is that she is very publicly flirting with Victoria Chase on essentially Facebook. Which, real quick, if I can go on a tangent, the fact that so many people survive the ending where the town gets hit by the storm, I don't like that, because it takes away a lot of the weight to it. But that's besides the point. So now we're going to end it off with some fun facts about Khloe. I've got my list pulled up here. Khloe's favorite movie is Blade Runner. We know this because Max puts it on when she visits the timeline where Khloe is paralyzed. They watch the movie together. And the character Pris is who inspired Khloe's haircut and wanting to dye her hair. Khloe loves the Hot Dog Man games and just character in general. She also appears to be fairly vegan. I mean, she doesn't eat vegan, but it's noted that the makeup that she chooses does not contain any animal products, and she's very staunch about that. And I think that's such a fascinating little detail, because throughout the series, while she's fairly unempathetic to other people and sort of doesn't really value their emotions, and she's only really caring about her perspective, when it comes to animals, she's very empathetic and very understanding. At some point in time, Khloe became very good at skateboarding, probably around the time she became friends with Justin and those other skater guys. And finally, the phone that Khloe uses in Before the Storm can actually be found exactly the same in Life is Strange 1. It's found in a drawer, and it's been decorated with all these stickers from her childhood, and her and Max probably threw it together. And I think it's very interesting that Khloe chooses to hang on to that, because it once again exemplifies how she can't let go of things. How, really, at the end of the day, Khloe is stuck in the past. And that's really her biggest flaw, I guess you could say. So thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you, and I'm just astonished that I got to 5,000 subscribers. I've been doing this for almost a year now, every single weekend on the dot, haven't missed a day, and I'm just very thankful that you guys keep watching every single week. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you, and I hope you have a good morning or evening or, you know, whatever.